Welcome back to Mr. Byström Flips, and to this video that I hope will be quite brief and that is intending to help you focus your closed textual analysis in your written essays, your literary essays, and to make your evidence clusters more effective. Just as a rehash, when I talk about evidence clusters, I refer to the body within the body paragraphs of your essay. So the actual evidence that's going to support and build your argument. So in a paragraph, you would have a topic sentence, you would have 2 to 3 evidence clusters, and then you would have a concluding linking sentence. So the core really in building a strong essay is to find strong evidence for your ideas. So choosing quotations that are relevant and effective is core in this, of course. So I'm not going to go into detail in terms of how to choose quotes here, but one rule of thumb that's easier to kind of keep with you is to choose quotes that are evocative rather than descriptive. Because if your quotes are purely descriptive, like the one below, the farmer had no connection with the bread, there's very little analysis to be done there. You can't really unpack that very much. Whereas an evocative quote like no man had touched the seed or lusted for the growth brings many more connotations and ideas and thoughts that you as a reader can then unpack and analyze and think about and use as part of your evidence. So if we look at the contents of the evidence cluster, it essentially has each evidence cluster will have 4 parts. You will explore where in the text your evidence is coming from, and this can be very specific or it can be more vague. You're exploring the point the writer is trying to make. What is the actual point he or she is making? And how does that represent, so how does the writer choose to represent this idea? This is where you think about language techniques and what language technique the writer has used to represent this idea. And then you get to do the actual analysis of that language technique and see how effective it is in conveying the idea to you or to the reader. And that is when you respond to the question why this is an effective way. So let's look a bit more closely at those 4 questions. So firstly, where in the text is your evidence coming from? This can be a very specific point. You can say the opening 2 lines of chapter 5, or it can be more vague, like early in the novel, or if you're comparing several texts, like we are looking at Steinbeck and Francisco Jimenez, The Circuit, you can simply say Steinbeck in his novel expresses blah, blah, blah. So in this particular example, my where sentence is even before the frustrations of the Joad family have been introduced, right? That is my where. So I know that the Joad family frustrations come into chapter 5. So this is placing it in chapter 4. We then get on to the what, and that's essentially what is the writer's point. Some of your teachers might have called this a lead-in, but essentially you're saying what is the quotation going to be proving. In this case, the second half of my sentence here, Steinbeck expresses his disappointment with the lack of passion in modern farming. That is going to be the main idea that I'm going to see in this quotation. And then you get on to the actual analysis of the quotation that you've chosen. So, and that's when we start exploring the how and then the why. So how in this case, you're answering the question, how does Steinbeck represent this idea? And the answer to that question is going to be a language technique. So here, and this is really where you start building up the stronger grades, right? Up to this point, your essay has been descriptive, and you might have had some ideas where you describe and sort of say, yes, Steinbeck is doing X, Y, and Z. But this is where you start being precise and analytical, and that's when you move your grades really from the C and D levels into the A's and the B's. So in my content, in my example here, I have chosen to focus on the diction and particularly the verbs. The verbs touched and lusted is going to be the language technique that I would be exploring if I was doing this particular quotation, and how they carry the meaning. And then that will go on to, so I identify those as my how statement. So Steinbeck uses diction, and he particularly chooses the evocative verbs touched and lusted would be my statement, my how statement. And then we move on to deepening that analysis. And that is when we explore, why is this an effective choice? Why did he choose to use these evocative verbs in the first place. And that's the effect of the writer's choice on the reader. So why did he choose that? So in my case, he's trying to evoke a sensation of caring and even sensuality in these verbs to connote the passion that the farmers used to feel. All right, and this is when you're starting to move your analysis into the B range and possibly even into the low A's. If you're really striving for the top marks, then where you want to put the effort beyond just having a how and having a why statement is to really start looking at the verb that you use when you're describing your why statement. So in this case, I've used the verb connote, connotes the passion the farmers used to feel. That's really when you choose the precise verb that's going to develop the effect that you're trying to, or the writer has tried to get at. That's really where the marks will start coming in for you. Whereas if you have some sort of flat statement like caring essential verbs shows the reader some feelings, then that's going to be much less precise, and therefore your analysis is not going to be as exact. So they are the four components of the evidence cluster, right? First of all, you identify the where is the text in the text that is situated. Then we go on to the what is the point the writer is trying to make, how technically is the writer expressing his or her ideas, and then why is this a particular choice that the writer has made. Start with those and then start building up your evidence clusters before you start, or in order to make your paragraphs stronger and more A-worthy, if you like. Any comments or questions, please post those below and we'll come back to further detail in later videos.